Okay, let's look at the difference between direct variation and partial variation, which is also known as indirect variation. So when we were looking at direct variation, we were creating equations of the form y equals mx, where y was the dependent variable, x was the independent variable, and m was the constant of variation. When we have partial or indirect variation, y, m, and x are the same thing, but b is something called the initial value. So as an example, for a equation for a direct variation, you could have y equals 2x, where your m value is 2, or y equals 1.5x, where your m value is 1.5, or y equals half x, where your m value is half. For a partial / indirect variation, you need to add a b value on the end. So instead of just y equals 2x, we'll do y equals 2x plus 1. Instead of y equals 1.5x, we'll do 1.5x minus 17. And let's see, instead of y equals half x, we'll do y equals half x plus 3/4. So as long as you add a number on the end or subtract a number on the end, then it goes from being direct variation to being partial or indirect variation. So that's the equation. Let's have a look now at the graphs. For direct variation, the graphs have to go through the origin or 0, 0. So for example, you might have a graph that goes through 0, 0 like this. Or maybe it's sloped very differently, but it still goes through 0, 0. Any line, any straight line that goes through 0, 0 represents a direct variation. For indirect or partial variation, it doesn't go through 0, 0. So this is basically any straight line that doesn't pass the origin, doesn't pass 0, 0. So it can't pass just here, but it can pass anywhere else. It could go like this and pass through here. It could go like this and pass through here. Anything at all, as long as it's a straight line and it doesn't go through 0, 0. Now let's look at a couple of applications of direct and indirect or partial variation. So when we have direct variation, there has to be something that varies. So for example, with salary, your M might be your wage per hour, because your wage changes or varies depending on how many hours you work. With indirect variation, you have something that varies, but you also have something that doesn't vary. So this could be maybe the job that you're working, you charge a flat rate. So let's say you charge $100 maybe to do yard work, but this is just an example. But your fixed rate is for every hour you're there, you charge $20. So because there's two parts to it, one that changes depending on how many hours you go or varies, that's why it's a constant of variation. but then something that's a flat rate no matter what, then it's considered to be indirect variation. Another example would be, let's say you go and buy ice cream. And there's a whole bunch of you going to buy ice cream, and so the thing that might vary would be the cost per ice cream. So the more ice cream you buy, the more it's going to cost. The less you buy, the less it's going to cost. So that varies. Depends on how much ice cream you buy. Now, let's say you go to a different store. You're still going to have your cost per ice cream. But let's say because there's a lot of you, they also charge a party fee for you to sort of book the place to have your ice cream. So that would be your fixed rate, and that doesn't change. Something that doesn't vary or doesn't change. So this is sort of where the difference is. So when you get an application problem and you're trying to work out if it's direct or indirect, look and see, is there something that varies and that's all? Or is there something that varies and then something that doesn't vary, something that stays the same?